Book 2, Ruthless Billionaire owns her to save her. Chapter 1. The estate was silent, wrapped in the kind of peaceful stillness Arya never thought she would know. The gardens beyond the balcony swayed gently with the wind, the sun painting soft golden streaks over the marble floor. She stood barefoot in the nursery, her fingertips brushing over the edge of the white crib Alexander had imported from Italy. It was hand-carved, elegant, absurdly expensive. Just like everything he gave her. But this was different. This was for their child. Her free hand rested on her belly, now rounded enough to be unmistakable beneath the soft fabric of her dress. 6 months. 6 months of Alexander waking with his arm around her waist, one hand splayed protectively over her stomach. 6 months of whispered promises and ruthless devotion. 6 months of silence from the past, until today. She turned at the sound of his footsteps. Always so precise, so unmistakably him. He walked in dressed in his usual black suit, his tie loose, sleeves rolled up. His dark eyes instantly scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her stomach like he always did. "You shouldn't be on your feet this long," Alexander said, already reaching for her. Arya smiled softly as he wrapped an arm around her waist and guided her to the velvet chair in the corner. "I was just looking," she murmured, "at what we've built." His gaze followed hers to the crib, then drifted back to her. "It's only the beginning." He knelt in front of her, placing both hands on her thighs and looking up at her with that rare softness only she ever saw. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Tired. Emotional. Like I want chocolate and also to strangle you." He chuckled, low and dark. "Good. That means our child is healthy and has your attitude." Her smile faded slightly. "And what if something happens?" Alexander's eyes sharpened instantly. "Nothing will happen." She reached for his hand and whispered, "I mean it. I feel safe here, with you. But that feeling still scares me, Alexander. I've never known anything this good without something terrible right behind it." He leaned forward and pressed a kiss to her stomach. "Then let them come," he murmured. "Whoever tries to take you, take what's mine, will learn the kind of man I am." Before Arya could respond, there was a knock at the door. One of the house staff stood there, pale and nervous. "Sir, there's someone downstairs asking to see you." Alexander stood in one fluid motion. "Who?" "She says her name is Veronica Laurent. She claims you know her." Arya frowned. The name was unfamiliar. Alexander went still, his jaw clenched. "I do," he said flatly. "Tell her I'm not available. Ever." The staff hesitated. "She also said to tell you, and I quote, 'You owe me. And if you don't want Arya to know the truth, you'll come down now.'" The room dropped into icy silence. Arya looked up at him slowly. Alexander, his eyes remained fixed on the doorway, but his face had turned to stone, cold, sharp, distant. "Stay here," he said tightly. "Don't move. Don't open the door for anyone but me." Arya rose despite the tightness in her stomach. "Who is she?" Alexander's voice was calm, too calm. "No one important." But his body told another story, the stiffness in his shoulders, the way his hand lingered on the doorframe. "You're lying," she said quietly. He turned his gaze on her, cold and unreadable. The man he used to be flashing in his expression. "Trust me, Arya, and stay. In this room." Then he was gone, leaving her standing in the nursery, her heart pounding with more than fear. Because she knew something now, something she didn't want to believe. Whatever peace they had built, it was about to be shattered. Chapter 2. Alexander descended the marble staircase with a predator's silence. His steps were calm, but his mind was anything but. The name Veronica Laurent hadn't crossed his path in years. He hadn't forgotten her. He never forgot anything that once belonged to him. And Veronica? She had once been very close to being his Arya, before she tried to burn him from the inside out. The butler opened the sitting room door as Alexander approached. She was already seated on the velvet chaise lounge, legs crossed like a queen, dressed in crimson silk and a wicked smirk. Still brooding and black like the devil himself, she purred as she looked him over. How nostalgic. Alexander said nothing. He closed the door behind him and locked it, slowly, loudly. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, voice low and lethal. Veronica's smile widened. "You didn't seem to mind me coming the last time. Though back then, you weren't married to your little porcelain doll upstairs." His jaw ticked. "Watch your mouth." She rose, walking toward him with the confidence of someone who had once been adored and now wanted to be feared. "Oh, I will, but only after I say what I came to say. You have 60 seconds. Veronica stopped inches from him, tilting her head. You owe me. Alexander didn't flinch. No, I tolerated you. Then I ended you. You want to play with fire again, Veronica? Her eyes flicked to the ring on his hand. I wonder if she knows what you did to keep that empire of yours. He stepped into her space, his presence overwhelming. You breathe Arya's name again and it'll make you disappear for good. Pregnant or not, she's not built for your games. Veronica's smile cracked just slightly. So it's true. She's carrying your heir. Alexander didn't respond. His silence was a loaded weapon. Veronica's eyes narrowed. You think hiding behind your wife makes you untouchable? I know where your skeletons are buried, Alexander. I helped you bury some of them, remember? He leaned in, voice deathly calm. And I know exactly where to plant yours. She flinched, the first crack in her porcelain poise. He continued, each word cold steel. If you've come for money, take it. If you've come for revenge, I suggest you rethink it. Because there is nothing, absolutely nothing, I won't do to protect her. If you so much as whisper near my wife again, I will turn your life into ashes. Veronica smiled again, but it was weaker now. You're different with her. No, he said, backing her into the wall. I'm worse, because I have something to lose, and for her I will destroy without blinking. Veronica's bravado drained slowly as she read the promise in his eyes. Alexander wasn't threatening her. He was promising her annihilation. She reached into her clutch and slid an envelope across the side table. Then give her this. Or don't. But if you hide it, she'll eventually find out. And when she does, she leaned in, her voice a whisper. She'll see exactly what kind of monster she married. Alexander didn't take the envelope. He stared her down with all the wrath of a king defending his queen. Leave. And never come back. Veronica looked at him for a moment longer, then turned and walked out, her heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. Alexander stood motionless. When he was sure she was gone, he picked up the envelope. It was light, but the weight of it crushed something in his chest. Inside, he already knew, was a piece of his past. Something ugly, something cruel, something Arya might not be able to forgive, but he would burn it before letting it come between them. He walked back upstairs, every step heavier than the last. And as he reached their bedroom door, his hand hesitated on the handle, because for the first time in a long time, Alexander William was afraid. Afraid not of war, but of losing the only person had ever killed to keep. Chapter 3. Arya felt it before she saw it. The shift, the weight, the silence. Alexander had always been a man of control, calm even when furious, collected even in chaos. But when he came back upstairs that afternoon, something in him had cracked. She had been curled on the couch, reading one of her pregnancy books, when she looked up and found him standing at the door, still and unreadable. Hey, she said softly, smiling. Everything okay? He walked to her slowly, knelt in front of her, and placed a hand on her stomach, but didn't say a word. Alexander? She pressed gently, touching his cheek. He finally met her eyes, but there was something different there, something dark and distant. I just need to hold you right now, he whispered. She nodded, confused but silent, as he wrapped his arms around her and rested his head on her belly. They stayed like that for a long time, but even as she stroked his hair and kissed the top of his head, she felt it. The storm was coming. The next night. It was after midnight when Arya woke to the sound of his office door closing downstairs. She slipped out of bed slowly, the silk of her nightgown brushing her legs as she padded barefoot down the hallway. She moved quietly, careful with every step. When she reached the stairs, she paused. Below, the soft crack of ice in a glass. The slow inhale of a man who couldn't sleep. She followed the sound into the office and froze. Alexander stood behind his desk, shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his powerful form shadowed by the dim glow of a desk lamp. He didn't hear her. His attention was locked on an envelope in his hand. His thumb stroked the edge slowly, like he was deciding whether to burn it or bleed over it. What is that? His head jerked up. He hadn't heard her come in. Arya? She crossed the room slowly, her gaze never leaving the envelope. Who is she, Alexander? He blinked, and for the first time since she met him, he looked, caught. No one important, her eyes narrowed. You locked the door when you met her. I didn't want you near her. Why? Silence, thick, suffocating. Arya reached for the envelope, but he stepped back instantly. Don't. Why not? She said, her voice rising. What could possibly be in there that you're afraid of me seeing? His jaw clenched, muscles working as his grip tightened. Arya? Let me see it, Alexander. She wasn't asking. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. Then slowly he extended the envelope, but didn't let it go when she reached for it. You read this, he said quietly. You won't see me the same way. Maybe I should see all of you, not just the part you let me love. His breath caught just barely before he released it into her hand. She opened it, one page, one photo, one line of text, and suddenly the air was gone, the floor, the silence, all replaced by a roaring in her ears. Blood, money. A woman's signature, Veronica Laurent, a date, years ago, and Alexander's name. Arya felt her knees buckle. Alexander caught her before she hit the floor. You killed someone, she whispered. He didn't deny it. She wasn't innocent. And you were? He closed his mouth for a beat, then opened them, his voice low. I did what I had to do, to survive, to win. She looked up at him, her face pale, her hands trembling. Were you always this cold? He didn't blink. No, I only became this man when the world tried to take everything from me, and now that I have you, it'll never go back. Her chest ached. You lied to me. I protected you. You buried the truth. I buried the threat. And if I have to do it again, I will. Silence, heavy, raw. Then, finally, her voice broke through. Soft, choked. Would you kill for me now? Alexander looked down at her, no hesitation, no shame. Without blinking, her breath caught. Would you lie to me again? His jaw tightened. If it meant keeping you safe, yes. And it wasn't what she wanted to hear. But it was what she needed to know. She stepped back, the paper falling from her hands to the floor, and then she did the last thing he expected. She walked to him and wrapped her arms around his waist. Don't lie to me again, she whispered into his chest. If I'm going to love a monster, I want to see his teeth. Alexander held her like she was the only thing tethering him to sanity. You already do, Arya, he murmured into her hair, and I will never let them bite you. Chapter 4. Arya didn't sleep that night. She lay awake in Alexander's arms, her mind looping over the truth she had read in that envelope. The woman, the blood, the signature. But not once did she pull away from him. Instead, her fingers curled tighter around his chest, her body warming to his in the silence of the dark. He was everything she'd been taught to fear, and somehow she'd never felt safer. The next day, Alexander stood behind her in the sparring room had built deep in the estate, a place she had never dared to enter before. It was all concrete, polished metal, weapons, and silence. You don't have to be here, he said, watching her reflection in the mirror as she tied her hair back. I want to be. She turned, meeting his gaze head-on. You said you'd do anything to protect me. I believe you, but I don't want to be weak anymore, Alexander, not even with you. His eyes darkened, not from anger, but pride. You want me to train you? He asked. I want you to show me how to be yours completely, not just in love, in strength, in darkness. He moved toward her slowly, like a shadow come to life. You understand what that means? She nodded. Yes, you'll see things you can't unsee. Then I'll see them. He reached for her hands, gripping them tightly between his. If I teach you everything, Arya, you'll become like me. No, she said softly, stepping closer. It'll become mine, but I want to know your world, so I can survive it beside you. Alexander didn't speak for a moment, then he leaned in and pressed his lips to her forehead. Then we start today. Elsewhere. Unknown location. A woman sat behind a desk in a darkened office, a cigarette burning between her fingers. Her nails were blood red. Her heels gleamed. She tapped a tablet, replaying security footage. Arya Blake. Pregnant. Powerful. Protected. So that's the girl who softened the king, that, she said aloud. Interesting. A tall, lean man stepped into the room. Do we proceed? She smiled coldly. Yes, let's see what happens when we pull the leash on Alexander Williams' heart. Later that night. She was breathless, sweaty. Her muscles burned from Alexander's brutal training session, but for the first time she felt powerful. He handed her a towel, his chest rising and falling just slightly faster than usual. You surprise me, he murmured. Because I didn't break? He smirked, pulling her into his arms. Because you liked it. She smiled against his chest, her voice soft. Teach me everything, Alexander. I want to stand beside you, not behind you. His voice dropped, gravel and silk. Then I'll make you the queen this world fears. And in that moment, she knew. She hadn't just fallen for the monster. She was becoming one of her own. Chapter 5. The house was quiet when Arya woke. Too quiet. Alexander had left early for a meeting, a rare one he didn't tell her about, and that alone had put her on edge. She sat at the vanity, brushing her hair, trying to stay calm, but her instincts whispered that something was wrong. The staff had been acting strange. She hadn't seen her usual maid all morning, and Simon, Alexander's right hand, had been missing for 2 days. No updates, no explanation. Arya placed the brush down slowly. She stood, one hand resting over her belly. She wasn't just protecting herself now, she was protecting their child. Downstairs, Alexander's office. The envelope was left neatly on his desk. No name, no seal, just her curiosity and the weight in her gut. She shouldn't open it. He wouldn't want her to, but he wasn't here, and she was tired of being kept in the dark. Her fingers peeled it open. Inside was a single photograph. It was her, outside a cafe from last week, smiling, alone, vulnerable, taken from a distance. On the back, a handwritten message, "You should have stayed a secret." Her fingers froze. And then a second photo, this time of Alexander, but younger, blood on his hands, standing over a man she didn't recognize, the same blood Veronica had threatened to spill. A matchbox from a club in Paris fell out next. Scribbled in the corner, "It begins tonight." Arya's heart thundered in her chest. This wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Meanwhile, Alexander paced the back room of the club, phone pressed to his ear. "Why didn't anyone report the drop?" he snapped. "My house is locked. Every camera, every gate. How did they leave something on my desk?" Silence. Then Simon's voice, clipped and cold. "Because it wasn't delivered. It was placed." Alexander's heart dropped. "Someone's already inside," Simon confirmed it. "It's the Black Siren." Alexander went still. "She's alive?" "She's not just alive, boss. She wants Arya." Arya moved fast. She grabbed the gun Alexander had taught her to use. Her heart pounded, but her hands were steady. She wasn't the same woman anymore. She wasn't helpless. She made her way down the hall, every sense alert. Then she saw her. A woman standing in the foyer, tall, elegant, dressed in a long black coat, her lipstick blood red. "Who are you?" Arya demanded. The woman smiled. "You must be Arya. You're even prettier up close." "What do you want, Alexander? But since I can't have him, I'll take the part of him he actually cares about." She stepped forward, and Arya raised the gun. "Try me." The woman paused and smiled. "Good girl. He's training you. That means you'll last longer than I thought. Leave." Now, the woman chuckled, not afraid. "This was just a message, sweetheart. I wanted to see you up close. The real show hasn't even started." And just like that, she turned and walked out, gone before Arya could breathe. Moments later, Alexander returns. He burst into the foyer, chest heaving, eyes scanning. Arya stood there, gun still raised, eyes locked on the door. He crossed to her instantly, grabbing her face in his hands. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, barely holding it together. She was here. The woman. Veronica didn't come alone. Alexander's grip tightened. His eyes went cold. "She sent the Black Siren." She said this was just the beginning. Alexander looked her over, then down at the gun in her hand. "Did you raise it at her?" I almost pulled the trigger. His eyes burned with something dangerous. Pride, rage, fear. "You've never looked more mine than you do right now." He pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. "This is war now. They want you, and they're going to regret ever thinking they could take you." Chapter 6. The air in Paris was colder than usual. Fitting. He hadn't been back in years, not since the last time he buried a threat in this city. But tonight wasn't about the past. Tonight was about revenge. Alexander stepped out of the black SUV, the club's neon sign pulsing like a heartbeat above him, Noir Siren. He knew the irony wasn't lost on her. The name was deliberate, a taunt. Inside, bodies moved to music. Red lights cast shadows over familiar sins, but he didn't pause. He walked through the club like a man with a loaded gun. Silent, deadly, and without hesitation. They all parted for him. Everyone recognized the man who didn't belong here anymore because he had become too powerful to crawl in shadows. A tall, sharp-featured man in a dark coat stood near the bar. Simon. "She's here," he confirmed. "Upstairs. She's expecting you." Alexander didn't nod. He didn't speak. He just moved. She sat on the velvet couch like a queen with poison in her veins. A cigarette burned between her fingers. Her heels sparkled in the low light, the Black Siren. She smiled when she saw him. "You came, finally. I was beginning to think you'd gone soft." "You came for what's mine," Alexander growled, his voice cold enough to freeze bone. "Now you deal with me." "Oh, darling," she purred, standing slowly. I wanted you to come to me. You've always been more interesting when angry." He said nothing, just stared. She took a slow drag of her cigarette and exhaled. "Arya, that's her name, isn't it?" His jaw clenched. She smiled wider. "You look at her like she's your oxygen. Makes me wonder, what happens when I take that breath away?" Alexander was across the room before she could blink. He slammed her against the wall, one hand tight around her throat, his face inches from hers. "If you come near her again, there won't be a body left to identify." She gasped softly, her smirk faltering. "She's pregnant, isn't she?" His grip tightened. "You're playing a game you can't win." "Wrong," she rasped. "I've already started it. Let's see if your little queen can survive the world you dragged her into." He let go suddenly, letting her crumble to the floor, choking and laughing. "War it is," she croaked. "Let's see if you can still kill like you used to." Alexander didn't respond. He just turned and walked out. But she had seen the rage in his eyes. He wasn't just protecting Arya anymore. He was preparing to destroy everything in his path. Back at the estate. The rain tapped softly against the windows as Arya stood in front of the mirror in the private training suite. Her reflection stared back, fierce and unflinching. Her hand rested on her stomach, where their child moved. Alive, strong, a symbol of everything she was now willing to fight for. "I'm not afraid of you," she whispered, thinking of the woman who had looked her in the eye and threatened to take her life apart. She picked up the blade Alexander had left for her, not to use, to learn. And she would. She was tired of being a target, tired of being soft. So she strapped the sheath to her thigh and said it aloud, "I'm going to be your worst mistake." Chapter 7. The first betrayal came in the form of a phone call. Arya was alone in Alexander's study, organizing documents for the upcoming press briefing, carefully arranged statements meant to quietly discredit the Black Siren and her growing influence in the underground. The line buzzed. Private. Untraceable. "It shouldn't have rung," she answered. A woman's voice, low, calm, poison-laced. "You really think he's told you everything, Arya?" Arya froze. "Who is this?" "The woman who helped build your husband's empire, and the one who knows exactly how it falls." Click. Silence. Arya stared at the phone. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She picked up the phone again and dialed Simon. "I need a list of everyone who's been near Alexander in the last 10 years, business or otherwise." Simon paused. "Arya, you don't have to." "I do." Her voice was calm. "Because if I'm going to be part of this world, I need to know what's hiding in it." She didn't run to greet him like before. She stood by the window, arms folded across her chest, back straight, belly high, and eyes like sharpened glass. "You got a call," she said without looking at him. "From your past." Alexander said nothing. "You once told me if I was going to love a monster, I had to learn his teeth." She turned, locking eyes with him. "Well, I'm ready to see them. All of them." His expression shifted. Not with anger, with something darker. Resignation. "You want the truth?" he asked. She nodded. "All of it." He walked toward her slowly, gaze locked on hers. "There's a man in my circle. Dmitri. Russian. He was loyal, until someone offered him more. And now he's feeding her everything he knows about me. About you." Arya's breath hitched. "Why haven't you taken him out?" "Because he's not the only one." That stopped her. "There's more? My empire is made of power and fear. The moment I fell in love with you, it gave them something else. Hope." Arya sat down slowly, one hand resting on her belly. "Then take the hope away." Alexander stared at her, almost in disbelief. "You're asking me to go darker." "No," she said quietly. "I'm asking you to show them who we are now, not just who you are, us, together." He stepped forward, kneeling before her, placing both hands over her stomach. "You're pregnant. You shouldn't be anywhere near this war." Her fingers touched his jaw gently. "Then don't send me to the battlefield, but teach me how to win from the throne." Later that week, Arya sat with Simon and 3 senior security operatives. A digital layout of their security network glowed on the large screen. "These are your surveillance gaps," she said, tracing a line near the estate's west gate. "This is where I was followed last month and where that envelope was planted. We need infrared fencing, low-profile guards, and better facial tracking on our staff." Simon arched a brow. "When did you learn all this?" she smirked, while everyone was underestimating the pregnant woman. She stood in the moonlit nursery, hand over her belly, whispering to the child growing inside her. "You're going to be born into a world of power, of danger, but also of love." She looked at her reflection in the window, strong, steady, sharp. "And I swear to you, baby, your father will destroy anything that comes for us. But your mother? She'll outsmart them first." Chapter 8. The first attack wasn't loud. It wasn't a gunshot. It wasn't a bomb. It was a leak. A carefully timed, malicious leak. Arya sat in the garden, a silk shawl wrapped around her shoulders, reviewing estate renovation reports. She had started involving herself in decisions Alexander had previously handled alone, slowly learning how to command more than just the space she stood in. Then her phone buzzed. Dozens of notifications, calls, messages, and finally, a forwarded headline from a contact in the press. Billionaire's pregnant wife once linked to former criminal ring. Black Siren claims she was one of us. Arya's blood went cold. The article was fake, but laced with half-truths and coincidences that made it believable. Pictures of her leaving a meeting. A cropped shot with a now-exiled Russian banker. Her name twisted with clever implication. Her fingers trembled, not with fear, with fury. Because she knew what this was. A trap, a psychological war. And it was working. The article made one thing clear. Black Siren was trying to isolate her. Make the world turn on her. Undermine her position beside Alexander before she fully took it. But Arya wasn't backing down. "You let them publish this?" Arya snapped, throwing the tablet onto his desk. Alexander's jaw tensed as he read the headline. "No one lets Black Siren do anything. She moves through bribes, leverage, and ghosts." Arya folded her arms, pacing. "Then it's time we show her I'm not just some soft target carrying your air." Alexander stood, eyes storm dark. "She crossed a line. Publishing your name, twisting your image, she made you a weapon against me. Then use me." His eyes snapped to hers. "Arya, no, listen. You said once that I was your weakness, that the world would use me to try and take you down. Then let's flip the board." She crossed the room, placed his phone in his hand. "Call the press, publicly." He arched a brow. "You want me to bring you into this war officially?" "Yes." Her voice was fierce. "If they're going to paint me as your weakness, I'll make sure they learn I'm your weapon." Alexander's lips curved into the faintest smile, not cold this time, but dark and proud. "All right then," he murmured. "Let's show them who the F you are." Alexander stood before the international press with Arya seated beside him, regal, radiant, 7 months pregnant and unbothered. He didn't let the journalists speak first. He opened the conference with a statement that would rewrite the rules of their world. "There have been lies, and not the usual kind that powerful men ignore. These are targeted attacks on my wife, and that makes them attacks on me." He reached out, laced his fingers with Arya's. "She was never a criminal, never a pawn, and she is not my weakness." Arya looked straight into the cameras. "I am Alexander's wife. I carry his child. I stand by his side not because he gave me power, but because I earned it." The room went silent, not out of respect, out of fear. Because in that moment, the world saw them for what they truly were, a king and queen with blood in their eyes. Back at the estate, Arya stood on the balcony, watching the headlines shift. Alexander stepped behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. "You scared them," he whispered. She smiled softly. "Good. They'll come for us harder now," he warned. "You understand that?" She turned in his arms, looked him dead in the eye. "Then they better come ready to lose." Chapter 9. It started with an explosion. Not in the city, not at the estate, in the network. A full breach in Alexander's encrypted system, the one no one was supposed to be able to touch. His private servers, his entire surveillance grid, his off-grid contacts, all frozen, and only one name appeared on every blacked-out file. Siren. The moment the power flickered, Arya knew it wasn't an accident. She stood from the sofa slowly, cradling her belly with one hand and reaching for the emergency tablet with the other. No response, no signal, no code override. Everything was down. She didn't panic. She refused to panic. She turned toward the hallway, expecting guards, but they were gone. She stepped back into the bedroom and locked the door. Then she opened the drawer and pulled out the one thing Alexander made her swear to keep within reach, a small handheld panic device. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. A direct, untraceable ping to Alexander. If she pressed it, he would burn the world to get to her. She didn't press it yet, not out of pride, but instinct, because she felt it in her bones. This wasn't meant to kill her, not yet. This was meant to shake her. And if it was a test, she was going to pass it. He was at the other end of the city when the alert came through. One single silent signal from the panic device. She hadn't used it, but Shed activated its presence. A whisper, not a scream, and that terrified him more than anything. He rose from the meeting without a word, tossed his phone to Simon, and ordered the entire convoy to the estate. The enemy had made the mistake of coming close again. They wouldn't survive this time. The lights went out. Fully. Complete blackout. She sat on the bed, her back straight, heart steady, blade tucked beneath her shawl, her hand pressed calmly over her stomach. She wasn't alone. She could hear breathing. Soft. Controlled. Male. A shadow shifted near the doorway. "You should have run when you had the chance," the voice said. Smooth. Mocking. She didn't flinch. "I don't run anymore." He stepped out of the shadows. Not a brute. Not an assassin. A messenger. He wore a tailored coat. Polished shoes. Arrogance. "She wanted me to see if you'd scream or fight. She said if you lasted more than 2 minutes, you might be worth keeping alive." Arya smiled. "Tell her this," she said softly. "If you don't walk out of this room in 10 seconds, I'm going to bury this letter opener in your throat, and when Alexander gets here, hell leave what's left of you in pieces." His smile faltered. "She said you were brave." "She's wrong. I'm ready." Just as he stepped forward, the sound of glass shattering echoed down the hallway. And then, Alexander was in the room. No hesitation. One gun, one shot. The man dropped instantly. Blood spread across the floor as Alexander crossed it. His gun still hot, eyes burning. He didn't look at the body. He looked only at her. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice tighter than she'd ever heard it. She nodded once. "I didn't press the button. I wanted to see what they would do." His jaw clenched. "You took a risk." "I calculated it." He walked to her, knelt in front of her, and rested his head on her belly like he did when words failed him. "I should lock you away," he whispered. "And I would hate you for it," she replied. Silence. Then, softly, "You're not just mine anymore, Arya. I never was." He lifted his head. "Then tell me, what do you want me to do?" Her eyes locked on his. "Let me rise, Alexander, or watch me burn trying." Chapter 10. 3 days after the attack. The estate was sealed like a fortress. Every inch watched, every staff member vetted. No one came in without passing through 3 levels of clearance. But Arya didn't feel trapped. She felt powerful. Alexander hadn't argued. Not this time. He hadn't locked her away. Instead, he gave her the keys to one of his offshore arms, an entire subsidiary under her name. Untraceable on paper, but whispered about in the darkest circles. A fund manager for private conflict resolution deals, bribes, takeovers, sanctions, and now hers. Arya entered the glass-walled suite in downtown Manhattan wearing black, a high-neck gown that hugged her 7-month bump, heels replaced with sleek designer flats. She was elegance laced in iron. Everyone stood when she entered. She didn't smile. "Sit." Her voice cut the air like silk over steel. The board obeyed. "Alexander William has handed control of this branch to me." She began. "If that frightens you, leave. If it offends you, stay. I like knowing where the weak links are. They were silent. We're at war now, and if I'm going to protect what's mine, I'll do it with strategy, not apologies." Her assistant handed her a dossier. Arya opened it and scanned the contents. One name was already marked, Dmitri, the mole. She looked up. "Our first move is internal. Loyalty checks begin today. Anyone with ties to the siren, fired. Quietly. Efficiently." Someone to her left shifted. A young man in a gray suit, nervous, sweating. She made a note. He stood in the shadows of the security room, watching her through the camera feed. Simon stood beside him, arms crossed. "She's better than any of us thought." Alexander's eyes didn't leave the screen. "She's not better," he said. "She's me, with more to lose." Simon tilted his head. "You're not worried she'll lose control?" Alexander smirked. "No, I'm worried the world will realize she never needed mine." An encrypted message arrived for Arya near the end of the day. Short, direct. "Check the woman on your left. She's not yours. She's hers." Arya didn't move. Her eyes lifted slowly to the woman seated at the edge of the room, a petite brunette who had barely spoken. The same woman who handled last week's internal records, the woman who had seen Arya's travel logs, her passwords. Arya picked up her phone. One button. Silent ping. She stood. "That'll be all for today." Everyone rose, some filed out, but not her. The brunette stayed seated and smiled. "He really let you run this?" she asked quietly. Arya stared at her. "You know what makes me different from him?" she said, calm and cold. He takes out threats before they get close. I let them sit down. Why? So they think they're safe. The door opened. 2 of Alexander's men entered. Quiet, efficient. They didn't drag the woman. They just handed her a black bag and whispered something in her ear. She stood, still smiling, but this time with fear in her eyes. Arya sat down in her chair, hand resting on her belly. Next. Arya stood under the stars, looking out over the dark garden. Alexander stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her gently. You made your first kill today, he murmured. No, I made my first move. He kissed her temple. You're going to take my world from me, aren't you? She turned in his arms and smiled. No, Alexander, I'm going to rule it with you. Chapter 11. The quiet ones always hide the sharpest knives, and Arya was starting to see them. They smiled in boardrooms, offered to carry her folders, brought her decaf coffee and called her ma'am like she wasn't a force building her own empire. But Arya knew this world now. Power didn't come clean. It bled. 3 days later, Alexander had been called to Geneva for a closed-door meeting. Short, secure, strategic. He didn't want to leave her, but Arya had insisted. If I can't handle 3 days without you, Shed said, I don't deserve to wear your name. So he left, with hesitation, with backup, with eyes on her at all times. Except one. It came from Dahlia, Arya's interim assistant, sweet, quiet, helpful. Until Arya entered the meeting room early and found Dahlia on a secure line, whispering coordinates to someone in Russian. Her blood went cold. Her hand moved to the blade tucked under her dress hem, a gift from Alexander, forged sleek and light, perfect for a woman trained to protect, not chase. She didn't interrupt the call. She waited, watched. When Dahlia turned and froze, caught, Arya tilted her head slightly. That wasn't a language you listed on your resume. The girl's mouth tightened. It's not personal. That's your first mistake. Arya closed the door. You made it personal the second you targeted me. Dahlia lunged. Arya sidestepped, just like Simon taught her, pivoting her belly safely to the side, not engaging strength with strength, but with leverage. The first stab came from the girl, the second, from Arya, straight to the shoulder, precise, shallow enough not to kill. That's for underestimating me, Arya said coldly. Blood poured down Dahlia's arm as she collapsed. Security burst through the doors seconds later. Too late. But Arya stood tall, breathing hard, calm. She's a plant, she said. Check her phone. Simon arrived within minutes, looking between the unconscious girl and Arya's steady grip on the bloodied knife. You all right? I'm done being the weakness, she said softly. Alexander was mid-meeting when Simon called. He answered immediately. Talk. She handled it. How bad? 1 knife. Her hand. Girl's alive. Arya's fine. Shaken, but standing. Alexander closed his eyes. She shouldn't have been tested like that. She passed anyway. Arya sat in the bath, soft jazz playing in the background, water swirling around her stomach. She had stopped shaking an hour ago. Now there was only steel. Alexander walked in quietly, removing his jacket, his eyes never leaving her. You stabbed her, he said, voice unreadable. I told her not to try me. He knelt beside the tub, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. You protected our child. I protected myself. That was for me. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, I've never been prouder of anyone in my life. Arya leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. You built a monster, Alexander. No, he whispered, eyes fierce. I fell in love with one. You just needed a reason to unleash her. Chapter 12. The headlines dropped like bombs. Pregnant wife of billionaire stabs assistant during internal power struggle. Arya Blake William, dangerous or dominant? The Queen of Blood, Arya's rise in Alexander's shadow. The media twisted the truth. Some called her brave, most called her ruthless. All called her dangerous. She watched the press conference on her private screen, a sea of flashing cameras, commentators, and firestorms. They'd made her a villain. But villains had power, and she wasn't afraid of it anymore. What she was afraid of was Alexander, not for herself. For what he might do now that they had dragged her into the light, pregnant, vulnerable, and now hunted. He entered the room without a word, phone in hand, jaw clenched tight. They crossed the line. I can handle? No. His voice was cold steel. They touched what's mine. I won't let them spin the narrative this time. She stepped toward him. What are you going to do? He stared at her, and for the first time in days, his expression softened. I'm going to make them remember who built this empire. Not you. Not the press. Me. Alexander sat down with the largest global media outlet. Live. Uncut. and he didn't smile once. "Let me make something clear," he said into the cameras. "Arya Blake is not the problem. She's the reason I haven't burned this city to ash. You should thank her." The reporter blinked. "Are you saying..." "I'm saying anyone who touches her, speaks her name, or questions her position in my life will answer to me." He leaned forward. "And I've buried people for far less." That night, riots broke out outside their Manhattan building, some supporting Arya, some calling for her arrest. And that's when the real betrayal hit. The NYPD issued a private request for Arya to be brought in for questioning, leaked, of course, by someone inside Alexander's own legal arm. He read the warrant. His own attorney's signature was on the internal request. Alexander stood, calm, terrifying. "Bring me Gabriel." What happened to Gabriel? The next morning, Gabriel was gone, resigned, missing. His firm dissolved overnight. His name was wiped from every office door. No one questioned it, because no one asked what happens when you betray a man like Alexander William. Chapter 13. Arya stood in the grand hallway, the weight of the day pressing on her shoulders. She was tired, 7 months, nearly 8. Her body ached, her mind was sharp, her emotions unreadable now. Then, a sound, glass breaking, shouts, alarms. No, not again. She turned, ready to run, but froze as she saw her own guard bleeding from the mouth, falling against the wall. Then came the voice. "You should have stayed the soft one, Arya. Black siren. Real, right there." Arya turned and ran, not away, not to escape, toward the panic room. She made it to the reinforced hallway, gasping, one hand over her belly, the other gripping the small weapon Alexander insisted she carry even within the estate. The siren was fast, but not fast enough, because when she reached the hallway, Alexander arrived. His rage was quiet, controlled, and then explosive. He didn't speak, didn't wait. He attacked. What followed was brutal. No elegance, no grace. Just two predators, one trying to end his world, the other fighting to protect it. Arya collapsed against the wall, breath heaving, and then her water broke. Too early, too soon, but there was no stopping it. Alexander turned just in time to see her slide to the floor, her eyes wide. Alexander, he caught her. Everything else disappeared. The lights were too bright, the pain was unbearable, but Arya's hand never left his. She screamed, fought, cried, cursed, and then, a cry, sharp, piercing, alive. Their child was born, 1 month early, but strong, a son. Alexander held him in one arm, his other hand cradling Arya's blood-stained fingers. "You did it," he whispered. She looked up, eyes glassy. "We did it." And in that moment, with the war behind them and life in his arms, the king was no longer ruthless. He was just a man who had everything to lose. Chapter 14. The mansion was silent. No alarms, no screams, no press, no blood, just soft classical music, filtered sunlight, and the quiet sound of a newborn breathing beside his mother. Arya hadn't slept much, but she didn't feel tired. She sat in the rocking chair, one hand wrapped around their son, the other resting gently across her still healing abdomen. Her body was different now. Softer, slower, healing. But her eyes? Still sharp, still steady, still fierce. He stood in the doorway, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows. There were no deals today, no threats to handle, only her and him, his son. Alexander hadn't moved in 5 minutes, just stood there watching her, the woman who had once mistaken him for a threat. Now, she held everything had ever protected in her arms. "You going to stare all day?" Arya's voice was soft, teasing. Alexander stepped forward, his hand brushing her shoulder. "You look dangerous like this." She smiled up at him. "Dangerous? In pajamas?" "No." He knelt in front of her, gaze locked on her face. "Dangerous because I've never had this much to lose." She reached up, fingers threading into his hair. "You're a father now, Alexander." He exhaled slowly. "It doesn't feel real." "He's real, and alive, and perfect." She leaned forward, whispering, "You didn't fail, you know. You kept us safe." He looked down at the baby, now asleep against Arya's chest. "He looks like you. He has your eyes. God help the world." They both smiled, quiet, tired, but full. Later that day, Alexander refused to let staff in. He changed the diapers, held the bottle, cradled his son like he was made of glass, even though the boy kicked with strength, had never imagined fatherhood, not in his world, not in his bloodline. But now, it was the only thing that made sense. He lay in bed later that night with Arya asleep on his shoulder and their son nestled safely in the bassinet beside them. For once, there were no enemies outside the door, no war plans, no whispers of betrayal, just the woman who conquered his darkness. and the child who would inherit the empire they'd built from fire and blood. Arya stirred beside him and whispered, "You don't have to protect me anymore." He kissed her forehead. "I don't protect you, Arya. I protect the world from you." And in the darkness, her quiet laugh wrapped around him like a vow. They had survived. Together. Now, they would rule. Chapter 15. 4 months later. The estate no longer echoed with war. It was filled with quiet mornings, soft baby laughter, and late-night whispers shared in candlelight. Their son, Lucian Blake William, had his mother's calm gaze and his father's storm-filled eyes. He was already reaching for things he couldn't yet hold, just like both of them once did. Arya had healed, not just physically, but fully. She wasn't the same woman who once mistook Alexander for a stranger with power. She was his wife, his equal, the queen of the empire. Arya stood barefoot on the balcony, holding Lucian close to her chest. His fingers curled around the edge of her robe as he dozed, content with the rhythm of her heart. She heard Alexander before she saw him, always so quiet, but never unnoticed. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "He's soft when you hold him," she smiled. "He knows he's safe." Alexander kissed her temple, brushing her hair back. "You gave me a son. We gave each other peace." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Instead, he took Lucian from her arms gently and cradled him like something holy. Arya turned, watching them both, the monster she once feared, now humming softly to the child they created together. Later, Arya sat at the head of a long outdoor table, reading over security reports. Alexander sat across from her, glasses on, marking documents in red. She glanced up. "You're still bleeding your ink across everything I touch." He smirked. "Because you like it when I leave a mark." Her smile was slow, intimate. "You're lucky you're a good father. You're lucky I'm obsessed with you." She rolled her eyes, but her cheeks flushed, warm and content. "You know," she said, standing and walking toward him, "we never got a honeymoon." Alexander looked up, dragging her into his lap. "You think I was going to let you escape the country pregnant?" "I wasn't going to escape. I was going to seduce you somewhere tropical." He traced a line along her neck, voice low. "Every room we've been in together, Arya, was a battlefield, a confession, or a war zone." He kissed her collarbone. "But now, I want a room where you smile first and scream second." She laughed, soft and wicked. "Then take me, anywhere. I'll take you everywhere." Lucian was asleep. The lights were low. The fire crackled. Arya lay curled against Alexander's chest in their bed. Her fingers traced idle lines across his bare chest. "Are we safe now?" she whispered. He didn't lie. "No one's ever safe in our world." "Then what do we do?" He kissed the top of her head. "We build walls so high, kingdoms break trying to climb them." "And if they do?" He smiled darkly. "They'll learn what happens when you threaten a man who has everything." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "You don't have everything, no? No, you don't have a daughter yet." He paused, eyes wide, then a laugh, deep, genuine, rare. "We're naming her after you." "Over my dead body," she whispered, grinning. And in the darkness, in the quiet, wrapped in love and threat and promise, they kissed like the world hadn't ended. Because it hadn't. It had just begun. The end. Written by Maria. Thank you all for taking the time to dive into this story with me. Your love and support mean everything, and I truly appreciate each and every one of you. This journey wouldn't be the same without you, and I'm so grateful to share these stories with such amazing readers. Stay tuned for more passion, more love, and more unforgettable moments. Until next time, see you in the next one. With love, always, Maria.